Hello, and welcome to Forensic Astrology. My name is Missy. Today I'm going to be talking about a case from 1976. This young girl's name was Teresa Gibson. Her nickname was Trenny, Trenny. So Trenny Gibson is what she went by mostly. She was a student at Bearden High School in Knoxville, Tennessee. She was in a horticulture class taught by a teacher by the last name of Dunlap. And they went on a field trip on October the 8th of 1976 to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park in the Clingmans Dome area. They arrived in the area at 12:30 p.m., around 12:30 p.m. She was last seen around 3 p.m. They were supposed to all return to the school bus at 3:30 p.m. to return to Knoxville. But Trenny never showed up to take the bus back to Knoxville. She was last seen on the trail. She had looked to the right of the trail that she was walking on, and she went off the trail into the woods and was never seen again. There are several theories about what happened to her. One of the theories was that she went off into the woods to look at something or whatever, and she got lost, and it got really cold there about 4 or 5 days later, and so the theory is perhaps she died of exposure. Another theory is she was kidnapped. Perhaps she got lost and then found her way to the road and maybe hitchhiked and asked for a way or a drive or a ride back to the area where she had been, and the person that was going to give her a ride decided to kidnap her. Maybe they were just waiting in the area for someone to prey on, and she just happened to be the one. There are some theories that it could have been some people that she was on the trip with. All of these are just alleged and theories. There's no legal facts to back any of this up. There was nobody ever charged with taking her or anything. There's another theory, and it's sort of a theory that I have. It's just one theory. I actually believe that she's a victim of foul play, but something that can happen in the Great Smokies, especially when you go off trail, there are fissures, Fissure, fissures in the earth, and some of them can be quite large, and they can be covered by brush and limbs and vines, and you would never know that there's a big hole in the earth there that you can fall into. This happened to me once. As a matter of fact, I was on a hiking trip, and I went off trail. I went off trail to go to the bathroom, as a matter of fact, and I fell into a fissure. And I was about 5 feet tall at the time because I was 16 at the time, and around 16. And I fell, and I was like up to my waist inside of that fissure. So I was able to get out. But if she fell into a fissure that was, larger or deeper, that may explain why nobody heard any screams. She may have broken her neck when she fell into a fissure or pit or whatever may have existed on the landscape there. That may be the reason why there's no trace of clothing or anything. They tried to find things like that and couldn't find any torn clothing, like evidence that maybe she was attacked by an animal or something like that. They never found anything like that. And shortly after she went missing, it started raining there in the national park, and that may have been why the bloodhounds could not track her scent in that area. they did track her scent in the Clingman's Dome area and in an area where the Appalachian Trail intersected another trail that she had been on. And so, like I said, there's not a lot to go on. There was an incident where a boy or man that she knew broke into her family's house, and her mother shot the young man in the foot, and he went to, I think, juvenile for a while, but he got back out about 6 months later, and I think he returned to Bearden High School. I'm not terribly sure. So, but I'm going to put links to articles below so that you can read these articles for yourself and brush up on the details. I don't want to misquote anything. But someone in one of these articles that I read remarked to another student that both knew Trenny something about if this person or that person got a hold of her that day, that he would kill her. Okay? I don't know the name of the person. Like I said, I'm going to post these articles below. But so there was somebody that didn't like her, or that was after her, or maybe stalking her or something, allegedly. And there was a girl that she went to school with that ended up with some of her jewelry, some of Trenny's jewelry. And when that was found out, she was asked to return the jewelry to the family, and she said that she would, allegedly. And allegedly, she never returned the jewelry. So, I don't know if there were some students that maybe didn't like her, maybe were jealous of her. Maybe that is the reason they wanted to harm her. Maybe they were on the trip. Who knows? This is all alleged. These are all theories. These are all things that I have read on the internet, and I hope that I'm not misquoting anything that I've read on the internet. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be looking at this crime, and I do believe a crime occurred, through the eyes of astrology, and that's what forensic astrology is. And so I'm going to be casting a birth chart. It won't be very accurate because I don't have her birth time. I don't know her family, so I cannot ask for the birth time. The birth time is important because it determines where the houses fall, what signs and what planets end up in what houses and everything. Astrological houses is what I'm talking about. And the fourth house is what I would need to see from the birth chart, because the fourth house represents in a chart the beginning and the end, the womb and the tomb, the end of a matter. Okay? And so that's why the birth time would be helpful if I had it. But since I don't have the birth time, I can use something called a horary chart, Horary, or a last seen chart, using the date, place, and time that she was last seen. And I can look in the fourth house of that chart in order to better determine what happened to her that day. So I'll be doing a birth chart, a horary chart for the day that she went missing. I'm also going to do another horary chart that will be dated in today's time, recent time. And how that is done is I will just ask the universe a question about her disappearance, and then cast the chart, and then look at the placements of the planets and houses, and determine some things about what happened to her. So now I'm going to get on to examining her birth chart. So here I have cast her birth chart, and I want to double check the details. She was born August the 17th of 1960. I don't know the time, so it says 12 p.m. I use the time of 12 p.m. whenever I don't know a birth time. She was born in Fulton County, Georgia, and Alpharetta is just one of the cities in Fulton County. So I just used Alpharetta, Georgia, because I don't know the city she was born in. And again, I don't know the time. But she was born in the Eastern time zone. So that's good enough. Now what you're looking at here is what's called the natural houses, okay? Because since I don't know her birth time, it's impossible to get an ascendant, which would be right here on the left side in the middle. That would be the ascendant or rising sign. Okay, but the natural chart without a birth time or anything starts in Aries and goes counterclockwise to Taurus and Gemini, etc., all the way around to the 12th house, which will end in Pisces. Okay, so now that I have confirmed her birth time, I'm going to move on to taking a look at her chart. So here is her chart showing only the natural houses. And already we can see that her sun, S-U-N, is in Leo. This symbol, the circle with a dot in the middle, is the sun, okay? And this symbol here is Leo. So she was a Leo. Now her moon, this is why the birth time would help. Because I don't have her birth time, I don't know if her moon was in Cancer, as it's showing here, or if it was in Gemini. If she was born a lot earlier than 12 p.m., say between 12 a.m. and 12 p.m., her moon might have actually been in Gemini. But I don't know because I don't have her birth time. And the moon moves very quickly. So that's why when it comes to the moon sign, you almost always have to have a birth time, especially if it's cuspy like this. See, this is a cusp right here. This line between Gemini and Cancer is a cusp. And it's just barely over the cusp right now in 3 degrees Cancer based on a 12 o'clock birth time. But like I said, we don't know her birth time. So it would help to know, like I said, her birth time so we could determine the moon sign. Her Mars was in Gemini. Her Mercury was in Leo. Her Uranus was in Leo. And her Sun was in Leo. So she had what's called a Leo stellium. Okay, and a stellium is 3 or more planets in one sign or house. So here she has 3 planets in one sign, which is the sign of Leo. A stellium is like a pointer, and it indicates an area of concentration in a person's life, area of most importance. And so, just by looking at this briefly, the Leo, the sign of Leo, and the sun represents the father. And so her father was probably very important to her, okay? And so I'm just going to assume that right away. Then we go over here to Virgo. Virgo is this symbol. It looks like an M with the tail turned inward, okay? Scorpio is the opposite. It's an M with the tail pointed out. But anyway, we're here in Virgo, and Virgo represents horticulture. And she was on a horticulture field trip when this disappearance happened. Now let's look at the planets that are in Virgo. We have Pluto, which is the ruler of Scorpio, along with Mars. Mars and Pluto rule Scorpio. Pluto rules death, and a lot of other unpleasant things, but we'll just start there. Then we have Venus in Virgo. Now Venus represents things like plants and flowers. There are other planets that speak of plants and flowers, but gardening and growing things in general, but Venus would be actually flowering plants mostly, okay? And then we have the North Node, which is also known as the True Node, okay? And so she also she doesn't have a Virgo stellium, okay, because the North Node is not a planet or a luminary. It is a mathematical point. It's one of the nodes of the moon, Okay, so it's a lunar node is what it is, but it represents fate in a chart. Okay, and so we have Pluto, which represents death. We have Venus, which represents flowering plants and just beautiful things in general. Also the sign of Libra and Taurus. And then we have the North Node here, which represents fate, all in Virgo, which is the sign for horticulture, among other things. Then over here in Scorpio, we have Neptune, which deals with things like, it can deal with art and music, but also things like drugs, alcohol, etc. Now, I'm not trying to imply that she was on any of that. I'm just telling you what this represents, the type of things that it represents. Camera, film, etc. And then over here in Sagittarius, this arrow right here is a symbol for Sagittarius. We have Jupiter in Sagittarius. Jupiter actually is the ruler of Sagittarius, and it looks like the number 4. And then here we have in Capricorn, okay, Saturn rules Capricorn, and Saturn is actually in Capricorn in her chart. Okay, and Capricorn rules things like instructors and teachers and things like that. It's also an earth sign. Also, Virgo is an earth sign. Okay, and so it also rules things like restrictions and no, you can't do this and no, you can't do that, discipline, that sort of thing. And then over here we have Chiron at 0 degrees, and 0 degrees in astrology is a critical degree, and I'll explain what critical means later. And it's 0 degrees Pisces. Chiron in astrology, it's actually a mythological character. It's not a real person. Chiron is known as the wounded healer. Chiron had a wound that would not heal. Chiron is associated with things like art and music to some degree, but also the medical arts. Chiron, in mythology, chose to die because Chiron could never get rid of his pain, and he was just so worn down by it and tired of it that he eventually chose to die. So these are the planets, luminaries, mathematical points, whatever you want to call them, a combination of all, in their signs. Like I said, houses are not known, and I would never be able to tell what houses any of these are in without her birth time, as I said earlier. This is the chart for when she went missing. Let's double check the dates and times, if my phone would please stop doing that. Okay, it was October the 8th, 1978, and the last seen time was around 3 p.m., and I put Gatlinburg, Tennessee, because we're talking about the Eastern time zone, and there's really not a way to put Andrews Bald or Klingman's Dome or whatever. So as long as it's the Eastern time zone, it's fine. I did what's called a whole sign chart because this is a horary chart, okay, which means it's based on a point in time, an event, not a person. Okay, well, in a way it's based on a person, but you know what I'm saying. Okay, so in this chart, the whole signs, as you can see, an entire sign is between these lines, okay? And I don't know how much you know about astrology, but I'm hoping my phone will allow me to zoom in a little bit better. I guess it's not going to. But there is a number for each house. There's 12 houses. It looks kind of like a pie that's been divided into 12 parts. And the 12 houses represent a part of life. So the first house here represents the self, basically. The second represents things like assets, what a person has. The third house represents things like siblings, short trips, etc. The fourth house is about the beginning and the end, the womb and the tomb, the end of a matter. And so it's also about things that are missing, how they may be found, or the cause of why they were missing, or things along that line, okay? So the fourth house is very important. It's something I look at. I also look at the eighth house because the eighth house is about death. And I also look at the 12th house because the 12th house is about sorrows, troubles, secrets, and losses. And so that's important also. So the ascendant, or the rising sign, that is the sign on the horizon at the time of a birth or an event or what have you. And it's around 20 degrees Capricorn. Okay? So the descendant, which would be right across the street, okay, would be about 20 degrees Cancer, because Capricorn and Cancer are opposed. I don't know what's happening here. Are opposed in the chart. Okay? So we have the first house here and the seventh house here. By the way, most things in an astrology chart move counterclockwise. There's a few things that run clockwise, but so that's why you see me going counterclockwise. Okay? So now let's take a look at the chart for the day that she went missing. We have the sun in Libra. Matter of fact, it was October the 8th. That was my 8th birthday. And I remember this story pretty well because my parents were watching it on the news, and my father had experience in the Boy Scouts and the military, and he actually went on one of the search team events where they went to look for her. I'm not sure, I can't remember which date that he went. There were 3 different searches. There was one right after she went missing that lasted about 4 days. Then it got too cold and they had to call it off. Then there was one the following spring. And then there was another one sometime in 1981. So there's been 3 searches that I know of that involved volunteers, park rangers, German shepherds, bloodhounds, etc., trying to find this girl. Okay? So the sun was in Libra that day. Okay? Mars was in Libra that day. The North Node was in Scorpio, which has to do with destiny and fate. Uranus was in Scorpio. The MC, or medium coeli, was in Scorpio. Venus was in Scorpio. Neptune was in Sagittarius. The moon was in Aries at that time, at 22 degrees, which is a critical degree. Then we have Chiron, or Chiron, in Taurus at, is that 0 degrees? Another critical degree. And then we have Jupiter in Gemini, Saturn in Leo, and Mercury in Virgo. And Virgo, like I said, deals with horticulture. Mercury deals with things like communication, short trips, siblings, etc. Also, the color silver, because what color is Mercury in a thermometer? Silver. But it's also the ruler of Gemini, okay, and can also indicate the color yellow. Review. So now I'm going to do a brief overview of her birth chart, which is going to be on the outside because, see, the sun here is in Leo, so this is going to be her chart in red. And I have also put the chart for the day that she went missing in blue so that I can see how planets connect in transit from the day she went missing and how they compare to her birth chart or how they relate to her birth chart. Okay, so she's in red, and October the 8th, 1976, the day she was missing, day she went missing around 3 p.m., is in blue. Okay, so I'm going to look at the 4th house first, and I see that the transiting moon on that day was in Aries. Now, Aries rules things like aggression, accidents, head injuries, fighting, the actual physical act of sex, which is the opposite. Okay, it's ruled by Mars. That's the opposite of Venus. Venus is more about, it's about sex, but more the lovemaking part of it. Aries and Mars is more about just the physical action of it. Also, the colors red and white. Okay. And the reason that might be significant is because there was a sketch done of a man who was described to the police, I guess, or a sketch artist, or both. They thought he was kind of suspicious. I think they said he was in the Klingman's Dome area and that he was a white male. I think they said he was late 30s, early 40s. I can't remember exactly, and I'm trying to find the sketch. As soon as I find it, I'll post it. And I think they said he was wearing a red and white ball cap. Now, Aries rules the head, the brain, the eyes, the eyebrows, and the face. Okay? And the transiting moon is here, and the moon rules things like preschool age children, mothers and children, women in general, cooks, okay, the digestive system, the abdomen and bust, that sort of thing. And so you have Cancer here. You have the ruler of Cancer, which is the moon, but it's in Aries, which is a fire sign. And the underlying natural house of the 4th house, the underlying natural sign of the 4th house is Cancer. Okay. So I find it interesting about the 4th house falling in Aries right here, especially when I think of the sketch of the man that was created probably by a police artist. I'm not terribly sure. Then I'm going to look over here in the 8th house. This is the 7th. So this is the 8th right here. Okay, she's in red. She has a stellium, but we don't know if it's in the 8th house or not because we don't know her birth time. But here we have Saturn in the 8th house by transit. Okay. And it's conjunct or combust Mercury, her Mercury. Okay, again, Mercury is about communication, siblings, short trips, grade school, writing instruments like pencils, pens, that sort of thing. It rules the sign of Gemini, and it also rules Virgo. And it's combust or conjunct or in a hard or harsh aspect with Saturn, which is things like restrictions, schoolmasters, that sort of thing. Okay, and then let's see. Over here we have Neptune in Scorpio in her birth chart, and it's combust or conjunct to Uranus in Scorpio by transit. Uranus is about sudden events, unexpected events, emergencies, 911, also perversions. Okay. Also rules the sign of Aquarius. And then I'm looking to see if I see any more conjunctions in the chart. I see that her Chiron, which is at 0 degrees Pisces, is conjunct to the, the third house cusp. Okay. And the third house cusp, the underlying natural third house is ruled by Gemini. And it also rules things like short trips, siblings, grade school, communication, and so on. And so the underlying third house is ruled by Gemini and Mercury. But by transit, it falls in Pisces. Pisces rules things like drugs, alcohol, maritime industries, maybe the Navy, art, music, film, the silver screen, the fish. It's symbolized by 2 fish. And it rules also the depths, water, the depths of the ocean, oceanographers, things like merchant marines. Again, I think I said the Navy, I'm not sure. And so all of this falls in the third house of short trips. And basically they were going from Knoxville to the Clingman's Dome area. I consider that a short trip. It's not like going on a very long journey. That would be Sagittarius. Sagittarius involves travel, but Sagittarius is more long distances. And I wouldn't consider this a long distance. And Chiron is a symbol of where you meet your enemies in life. And so we have her Chiron, where you meet your enemies, falling into the third house, okay, of things like, as I said earlier, short trips, siblings, things like cousins, all things that are ruled by Gemini, communications, etc. Chiron by transit, which is in the blue, which represents the position of Chiron on October the 8th of 1976, it's falling into the 5th house, which is ruled by Taurus. Taurus is ruled by Venus and the Earth. And Chiron is falling into this house, okay, the 5th house. And the 5th house represents things like recreation, speculation, gambling. In a chart, it can tell like how many children or if a person will have children and things like that. And transiting Chiron, which is where we find our enemies and things that need healing or where you may find your healing and or enemies, is in Taurus. And like I said, Taurus is an earth sign. So to me, this translates that she would find her enemies, so to speak, during some sort of recreational activity that involves the earth, and this was hiking, right? Fifth house matters are recreation. You know, a field trip would easily fall into the fifth house, even though it's a school activity. It's still a recreational activity, okay? And so there's Chiron, where you find your enemies, in the house of recreation and fun. So this concludes the introduction or brief overview of this case. If you know anything about the case or what happened to her, please check out the links below and contact the appropriate authorities. Just a little description on her. She was maybe, I think, 5'3". She weighed about 115 pounds, so she was a very small person. She had brown hair and green eyes, and as you can see, very fair skin. Again, her name was Trenny Gibson, or Teresa Lynn Gibson. She went missing October the 8th, 1976. I'm going to be adding videos to this series. I'm going to do a video next. I'm going to go into more depth on the horary chart and her birth chart and the day that she went missing. And I'm also going to do a horary chart where I actually ask the question before casting the chart about more details about what happened to her. More detailed, specific question is what I'm going to be going into on the next video. So thank you for watching this video. Please check the links below. If you would like and subscribe, I would appreciate it. Thank you very much.